I realize that a certain number of our audience are in their 50s and 60s and 40s and 30s. And back in the day when we had talk radio and I was in a much more balanced frame of argument, we had a lot of young people who used to listen. But like a lot of people I know, maybe you, as these years, we got through Bush too. And I had a hard time trying to proclaim my Americanism, my patriotism, because I was being led by one of the stupidest men who ever was president, George W. Bush, and who had no problem committing a genocide against the people of Iraq, committing a genocide for no reason except because he could. I know that's not the bullshit story he put out, but that is the truth. And I remember my good friend Bob Alexander, who he and Jude Morford, the woman who runs Women Standing website, a peace website, and Bob's wife and his son, and maybe one other person, or maybe not. Bob bought enough copies of the book put out by, who was it, the former prosecutor in L.A., drawing a blank on his name. That's one of the things about getting older. Your memory banks are getting rusty. Italian guy. What was his name? He wrote Helter Skelter too. Damn it. But Bob raised money and bought enough copies of the books, and he sent a copy of the prosecutor's book, the charges against George Bush, where this prosecutor said that this former prosecutor, if any prosecutor in any county in the United States that had sent or had taken, well, there was no draft, but had sent people to Iraq on Bush's little adventure who had been killed, that this prosecutor could make the case for a trial, an impeachment of George W. Bush. I don't think it was impeachment. I think it was actual murder charges. And they sent copies to every single county prosecutor in the United States. One responded kind of half-heartedly and then dropped it. So I came through that, and I started thinking, because I was doing radio at the time, honest-to-God radio, and I remember thinking, what has happened to the United States? And I was naive enough to consider George W. Bush to be a fascist. He wasn't a fascist. He wasn't even a neo-fascist. He was just a goddamn war criminal. And there is a difference. And then we had Obama, which was, I thought, the beginning of a golden era in the United States. I didn't realize until maybe 6 months into his presidency, when I was in the North Georgia mountains, really in the North Georgia mountains, and ran into the hideous racism that targeted Obama and his wife and his two daughters. And then I started hearing about the death threats against the president and the rise of these militias, and it was just like, where am I? It was around that time that my good friend Bob Alexander decided to emigrate and move to Canada, where he is now a citizen, he and his wife and son. And he asked me at the time, why are you staying? Why don't you come to Vancouver, to British Columbia? It's beautiful up here. And I know it is. I've been to Cascadia. I know. It's wonderful. But I didn't feel like I could at the time. And then Trump. And I, along with just about every liberal, every progressive, every moderate, and a vast number of Republicans who have now sold their soul to Satan and become pro-Trump, but a vast number of Republicans too. Everybody was warning this man cannot be allowed to be president of the United States. Remember all that? One of the leading advocates of that point of view was Lindsey Graham, who is now Trump's lapdog. And so many of these scummy, filthy Republican leaders who couldn't say bad enough about Trump when he was a candidate, and now would kiss his ass in the middle of Main Street just to be pat on the head by this monster. But anyway. So it's been it's been very rugged for a lot of people in this country who are getting older now, who are aware of the struggles. That's why I am so shocked in a good way by the Black Lives Matter movement, by the resistance that's going on in this country right now against this fascist pig Trump, this racist fascist pig Trump. And he really is one. I mean, there is no question about Trump. But there has never been. For me and for a lot of people, that's what I couldn't understand. Why couldn't people see that as distasteful, if I can use kind of a bullshit word, as distasteful as it may have seemed to have had a Hillary Clinton presidency, Hillary Clinton was no fascist. She might have been a snot, maybe a bit arrogant, more than a bit, but nothing like this. And I could never figure out, and still can't, why so many people who went to the polls, well, let me rephrase that. So many people on Election Day 2016 did not go to the polls or went to the polls and voted for a third-party candidate, guaranteeing the presidency to a man who's not capable of being somebody's caddy at a golf club. And worse than that, to a man who is an incipient fascist, a full-blown, full-out racist, and the most ignorant savage ever to occupy the Oval Office. And just about every day that goes by, I think to myself, well, Malloy, you used to say that George W. Bush was the worst thing that could happen to the United States. Holy shit. May I take all that back? No, you can't. You can't unsay words, Mr. Mike. It can't be done. But now that I've had the horrific experience of seeing the birth of fascism, true fascism in this country. I know there was a partial birth back in the 30s. I understand that. But I wasn't around to see that. And it was a partial birth abortion, to use the Christian right's own term. This, with Trump, has been a live birth. And I'm reminded of Rosemary's Baby when Mia Farrow, the character she was playing, the mother of the newborn Satan child, when she walked into the room near the end of the film and walked over to the pram in which the baby was lying, and she pulled back, because the baby was crying, and she pulled back the curtain that the drape they had over the bassinet or the stroller or the baby buggy, and she looked in and almost fainted for what she saw. And, of course, the audience, we never got to see what it was, right? But I think about that scene when I think about Trump and what he has brought about in the United States. It's just pure horror. just as surely as the ending of Rosemary's Baby was pure horror. And what's going to happen this November? Well, I've said it before, and other people now are starting to dance around the issue. What happens when Trump says, I'm not leaving? Or worse, what happens when Trump tries to cancel the election? I heard today that in Kentucky, because of the nudge, nudge, wink, wink coronavirus, 90%, did I see that right, of Kentucky's polling places are being closed? Is that true? The election is 4 months away, or 5 months, 6 months. We will watch and report. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. You have your choice. You can listen to The Ranting with the audio podcast, or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.